Welcome back, everyone. You know this is Lights, Camera, Action. It's Make Our World Your Runway. This is the weekly show that interviews the most fascinating individuals from the world of modeling, fashion, beauty, business, and even the entertainment industry. But before we start our show, we always want to thank the sponsors that make this show so possible every week. And that is the Global Trade Chamber, 100 Successful Women in Business, Carlo Albizo Photography, Lux Salon, Queen Beauty Network, Tower Club, Royal Dames, Vita Designs, and Casa Calabria. So sponsors, thank you so much for making this show possible. And as always, I tell my viewers we have a very exciting show planned for you today, okay? And before we do that, we'd like to make a few announcements. And I want to tell all our viewers, remember to subscribe to the Global Trade Chamber YouTube channel so that you can see all the shows from Make Our World Your Runway and Success Stories. And I highly recommend that you tune into Success Stories because this show features the most amazing women in the world of business and community service. From humble beginnings to successful entrepreneurs, these women will totally inspire you. And get ready for an exciting conference speaker and awards as 100 Successful Women in Business and the Global Trade Chamber are going to be coming to a city near you. And that is going to be November 5th and 6th. It is going to be in Miami, Florida at the Doubletree Hotel and Convention Center. So we're calling all successful women in business because it's time to shine a light on your achievements. You can nominate yourself or a colleague for a chance to be honored at the special awards dinner gala in Miami on October the 6th. So we want to come together to honor the impactful work of women in business and community service. So remember to claim the well-deserved award, but you need to be present in Miami at the awards dinner gala to receive this prestigious award. So nominate yourself or your colleague for the 2025 reception award ceremony. And there's also going to be networking, conferences, business expo, fashion show, and of course, Make Our World Your Runway will be going there live. Now, for all the information, please go to the website at www.100swb.com. Now, this is a free event. We have women coming in from around the states and around the world. But if you want to be an exhibitor and you want to attend the gala, I highly recommend that you go to the website now. These shows are always a sellout. I'm not sure what's left. But once again, please go to the website at www.100swb.com. It is a fabulous expo and a fabulous event. You'll be meeting women, like I said, from all around the world. And again, you can be an exhibitor. And if you want to be a speaker, you must go there now and register because, as I said, these shows are always sell out in advance. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're on to our show. We really have a special guest today. He's a film producer making his highly anticipated Hollywood debut with the groundbreaking documentary, COPA, The Beat Never Dies. His unique journey to film is built on a foundation of discipline, high-stakes access, and strategic business management. He is a proud veteran of the United States Army and U.S. Coast Guard, and a dedicated father to his son, currently enrolled at the University of Iowa. He is also formally trained as an actor, having completed an intensive program at the prestigious Stella Adler Studio of Acting in New York City. And he spent 15 years in real estate, including a notable tenure at the SERHANT Realty, where he worked alongside the cast of Netflix owning Manhattan. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's bring the gentleman on that's going to do so much for COPA, The Beat Never Dies, Frank STITT. Frank, welcome to Make Our World Your Runway.
Hi, Angela. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How about yourself?
Doing well, doing well.
You know, I love that. The COPA, The Beat Never Dies. I love that saying.
Yeah, it's the untold American story, about the mid 20th century. So we're talking about the glitz of Hollywood and the grit of the mob where they collided. And that place helped shape the culture, the music, and even politics at the time.
It shaped everything, okay? I think it even, you're right, politics, it shaped Hollywood, it shaped the culture. That Copacabana was so iconic. And you know what? It's a name that never dies. You know, when they talk about the big band era, how that music never died, well, that never died as well, okay? And anybody you mention it to knows knows the Copa, or if you say Copacabana, they know that iconic club.
Sure. Now, like a juxtaposition, so you have like Studio 54 or say the Cotton Club, someone might say, why is the Copa more relevant? Well, the Copa spanned decades. So it wasn't just a fly on the wall. You know, I think the Studio 54 was just a 2 year stint. So we're talking about decades and decades and decades of influence. And there are so many juicy stories that we're happy to be sharing with our audience.
Exactly. And you just made a point because, as you know, I was a fixture in Studio 54. And you're right. That besides, I was more of a fixture, I would say, at the Copacabana, but I did hang out in Studio 54. And you were right. That was basically only a 2 year, maybe 3 year stint at the most. And most of the disco clubs, that's basically all it was. And a lot of people don't realize that disco actually did come out of Motown. It was a different sound for Motown, but that's where it came out of. Now, the original Motown, of course, is always going to go on. But I think the disco era started, well, part of it started in 76, 77, but it was 78 till I'd say maybe the early 1980s. That was really the height of disco. And then after that, music totally changed.
Right. Yeah, and that's about the same time when the owner and management had changed at the Copa because Jules Bedell had it up until 1973 until he passed away. Then it closed down and then it reopened in 76 where John Giuliano took it over and he brought more of that Latin flair to the club and, just pushed it.
Yeah, no, John did a heck of a job with that, especially in an era when music was changing. And you know, it's funny, you talk about the mob. This is a funny story. Last week I was working one of the international conventions here at the Broward County Convention Center, and they're building the Omni Hotel. And of course, you know, there's big construction companies there. It's not only construction companies that from Florida, but they came in from New York and whatever. So there's a couple of Italian construction companies there. They came in, and the convention center was giving them, you know, free food and free drinks because the amount of work that they were doing. I mean, I was watching it because where our table was, I was right there where the bay was, so I could watch everything that was going on. And there was a gentleman standing next to me and says, why aren't we getting free food? And I said, do you see the names of these construction companies? I said, do you want to get shot? He just looked at me and says, oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I said, yeah. I said, go take a walk. So, and it was so funny because under my breath I was saying, even in construction, the Copa never dies. So, you know, it really is, okay, a name that I think, you know, as FDR said, a day that'll live in infamy, that's the Copacabana. It's going to go on in infamy forever.
Sure. And, also what made it very special is, you're talking about the biggest celebrities in the world, the biggest athletes, the biggest acts of the world. And at the same time, you have the mafia that has a stronghold on the club. They not only owned it, but they managed it. And with a iron fist at that, with Jules Bedell.
Oh yeah, that was an ironclad fist. I mean, unbelievable. Okay, they really had their hands in that. But you want to know something? And if my uncle was alive, and when we do the documentary, I'll even bring that out more. He always said, when the mob ran Copa, Vegas, and even part of Atlantic City, it was unbelievable. Okay, if they knew who you were when you walked in, they knew the drink, they knew the food you liked. It was unbelievable when that. In fact, there's a book out called "When the Mob Ran Vegas." Okay, and it was so funny because I was in a couple of years ago. I was in Las Vegas, and I was flying back, and even the flight attendants were interested in what I was reading, and I was reading that book, "When the Mob Ran Vegas," and they were like, "What page you on?" So. And I was shocked because some of the flight attendants were mature, but some of them were young. And they really wanted to know what was going on. And they verified it, okay? That they said yes. They said when the mob ran Vegas, it was unbelievable.
Sure. And, part of the allure of the Copa, imagine you're a patron inside and, anything can happen at any time. And you kind of, whether conscious or unconsciously, know the mafia is running the club, but you're also next to the celebrities at the same time. And that's kind of the allure.
Exactly. And that's just it. In fact, I was watching Goodfellas last night. It was on. And the part where Ray Liotta walks into the Copa and he comes in through the back way. Okay. And of course, he goes to the maitre d'. And he says, oh, yeah. He says, I got your table right here. And it was people waiting and saying that, oh, we've been waiting for over an hour. He says, yeah, I know you're waiting for a table, but they got priority. Okay. And there was, when he sat down, it was another group who said, hey, this is a bottle from Mr. Tony, and they're over there like this. And I'm saying, oh, bring back those days.
Yeah, the dress code, the strict policies, the over the top entertainment, that was all a part of the code that they enforced. That was a product of the mob that really helped out the Copa.
Oh, yeah. And it helped out everywhere. I mean, when Atlantic City first opened up, I don't know if they weren't exactly totally involved, but then all of a sudden they became involved. And that's when Atlantic City started to blossom, okay? And I think at one point they were involved in the Catskills too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah, because I watch that show on Saturdays. It comes on, we have a channel here in Florida, it's called 239. And there's a gentleman that does Remembering the Catskills. And he shows the pictures of the hotel. I mean, there were some swanky hotels up there. He shows the poolside, the entertainment that was up there. He said, none of that exists today. He said, but the memories are still there, okay? And I believe what had happened, when the mob wanted to build in Atlantic City, well, Vegas knew they were going to come out to Atlantic City, they offered the Catskills to rebuild the Catskills, and they turned it down. And that's what happened, because that's when the Catskills really started to collapse and everything went into Atlantic City. But I played the Catskills. That was some area up there. I mean, every major entertainer was in the Catskills.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of the guys that I've spoken to that performed at the Catskills, Peter Lemongello is one of the guys that I have spoken to.
Right.
Paid a visit to him in Florida, and he had said he kind of grew up in the Catskill area and he played there often. And his son, even today, Peter Lemongello Jr., he plays and entertains at the Catskills.
Oh, yeah, they still have some places up there, okay? And especially more in the summertime up there, when people are going. And in fact, when they had the Winter Olympics one year, they took over the Catskills, okay? The Olympic crew. But I remember at one time going up there to perform, and it was something else. It was always crowded. I mean, and you had a Browns, which was owned by Jerry Lewis. I mean, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, even Liza Minnelli played the Catskills. Yeah. So you had the Copacabana, you had the Catskills. Of course, you're always going to have Vegas, okay? And I think in Vegas, Stephen Wynn, I think, was the biggest guy that actually started a lot of that.
Sure.
Yeah, because he had all the major hotels. And now I understand the Seminoles are really building in Las Vegas.
Right.
Yeah, and it's so funny because they got stories. If you talk to some of them, they have stories about going back to the Copa.
Yeah, the Copa was it was more than just a venue for entertainers. It really made people's careers. So when they made it to the Copa, that was like the pivotal point in their career. Sammy Davis Jr., the first time he played there, and not just him, but they broke racial divides. Jules Padel was the one to bring black entertainment there for the first time.
Right.
That in the first few years, it was they weren't allowed to play there. Jules Padel later changed his mind from I guess Monty Poser had influenced him to make that decision. But nevertheless, the Temptations, so many other.
So exactly. Oh, the Temps really broke up. In fact, I was reading a story last night. Frank Sinatra with Nat King Cole. And they were in Vegas, and of course, even back then, you know, they were supposed to go in through the back way, and they didn't have the best of rooms. And Sinatra put his hand on his shoulder. He says, "Tonight, we laugh together." And it was Sinatra who broke open a lot of the venues where it was able. He brought in a lot of the black performers, okay, into a lot of the major hotels, and like you said, the Copacabana. Even all right, when Atlantic City came up, of course, we were all past that. But and a lot of people don't know that Elvis Presley broke open, okay, the barrier for a lot of blacks, because when Elvis first came out, they thought he was a black person singing. He just happened to have that voice, okay? And I remember seeing the movie, and the Colonel said, "I'm not managing a black guy." They said, "He's not black." They said, "Wait till you see him." And that's when the Colonel knew that that was a gold mine that he had, because he was a white fella, had a black sound, swivel hips, but he broke it open down in the South for a lot of the black groups. And I even read his book, and that is exactly what happened. So there were a lot of barriers between the COPA, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, that really broke up. And I was very surprised Elvis Presley never played the COPA.
Yeah. I'm not sure about that. I didn't hear anything about him getting an opportunity to play there.
No, because he came out, what, in the late 40s, early 50s? So I was very surprised that he never got an opportunity to play there. But then again, he was, yeah, there has to be a reason behind that one.
Right, right. Well, that, you know what, that's a good idea. That maybe that's something I can delve into and see if I can't find some information on that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night. I said, if anybody I said could do that could be Frank. I said, because I was wondering about that. Because even my husband asked me, he said, "Didn't Elvis play the Copa?" I said, to my knowledge, no. I said, his name does not come up with the Copacabana. But then it could be the Colonel, because the Colonel never, probably Jules Fidel, they probably did not get along. All right. In fact, the remake of A Star Is Born, they had when Barbra Streisand made it, it was not supposed to be Chris Christopherson. It was supposed to be Elvis Presley. But her and the Colonel fought. I said, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, Barbra Streisand and the Colonel fighting together. But the Colonel wasn't an easy person to get along with, okay? So that could have been the case. All right. I mean, as far as the Ed Sullivan Show, oh God, I think Elvis was on there, like, he practically lived on that show. But that, and in fact, they had a rerun the other night of Ed Sullivan. He had Tom Jones on, and he says, "I just saw him at the Copa, direct from the Copa. Here's Tom Jones." Okay, so what Ed Sullivan did was he would go to the Copa, and a lot of the acts that were there, he'd bring them on his show. So they weren't losing like any steps or anything. If you saw them at the Copa, now you had an opportunity to see them Sunday night on his show.
Sure. Yeah, you know, Monty Poser, the original, the guy on the paper that ran the Copa from the 1940, he had a really good eye for, you know, finding talent and bringing them to the Copa to, you know, so they emerged, and you know, he was ahead of his time.
Exactly. And, you know, Tito's father always played the Copa, okay? Yeah, and I mean, well, Tito's father played everywhere, especially in New York City, okay? And when we did that show on board ship, and we called it Return to the Copa, and we announced it, oh my God, you couldn't get a seat in the house, all right? And Tito did a great tribute. He says, my father played the Copacabana. He said, and tonight, he said, I'm going to do a tribute not only to my father, but to the Copacabana. And his father was also in the Mambo Kings too, but that was all about the Palladium.
Sure. Yeah. So Tito Puentes Sr., we actually got in touch with his lead vocalist. I'm not going to give too much information now, but it's part of our story on the Copa is certainly going to have some insights into Tito Puentes Jr. and his father Sr. as well. So it's really exciting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when we do that documentary, and I don't want to get into too much as well, but when I tell you about the night I had dinner with Sinatra and Tito's father walked in, I mean, it was Unbelievable.
I mean, it's
That's
just
a
a
story I've got to get, and I cannot wait to hear it, and I can't wait for the world to hear it, you know?
I was talking to my husband about that last night, and he's sitting there. He said, "How long was this dinner?" I said, "Half the night." He said, "But then you went out to the clubs." I said, "Yeah, and that was the rest of the night." He said, "What time did you get home in the morning?" I said, "Oh, it was about 5, 6 o'clock." He said, I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "If you hung out with that group, that's about the time you were getting in." Okay. I said, "You went from one thing," I said, "into the next." But they were great times. You know, I always say, I wish those times could come back.
Yeah, speaking of good times, some of the best comedians also came to the Copa. One in particular, Don Rickles, was like
oh,
huge, huge, and they couldn't get enough of him. I think in his whole life they couldn't get enough of him. The guy was such an
no.
anomaly.
They couldn't. Henny Youngman was another big one. In fact, if you watch Goodfellas, that's when they were in the Copa, that's who was performing, Henny Youngman. Okay, so he was another one that performed there. Yeah, they also had a lot of good comedians as well that performed at the Copa. But you're right, Don Rickles, they could not get enough of him.
Speaking of a black comedian, it was a civil rights activist, used to work with Martin Luther King. His name was Dick Gregory. There's
I
a
was just
whole
going to say
there's a
that.
whole documentary about him, but he performed in the Copa. I think it was around 1962, 63.
Yes.
That was a big deal.
A big deal. Well, you know who gave him his start? Was Hugh Hefner at the Playboy Club when he used to have
Going up the
That's
dog.
that's where he played there first, and then he came to the Copa.
yeah, it was, and that's right. There's a documentary on HBO right now. Okay, the one and only Dick Gregory. When you mentioned that, I was going to say that. And then after that, he was able to play the Copacabana. Yep, that's right. Because they wouldn't let him play anyplace else. But it was Hugh Hefner that did give him his start. And it was called, I remember that, Playboy After Dark. And he was the comedian there. Yeah. And he had a great show, Dick Gregory.
That's right. And then, also, talking about the racial divide and how they broke barriers. You remember the 1957 the Yankee Brawl?
Yes.
So you had like Billy Martin, Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams, uh, Yogi Berra. They were there and they were heckling Sammy Davis Jr., yelling racial slurs allegedly, and they didn't like it. So they beat the hell out of these guys and put them in the hospital. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
made the front paper of the New York Times.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mickey Mantle, I happened to meet one time. And Mantle was like that, okay? He had an attitude, okay? He was a great ball player. I can't take that away from him. But he thought, yeah, he thought everybody was beneath him. That was Mickey Mantle, okay? And I do remember that. Later on in life, he mellowed out, okay? When he started doing his book tour and he couldn't play baseball anymore, he mellowed out. But yeah, he definitely was like that, okay? And I worked in Bergdorf Goodman. He used to come in and out. And he did have an attitude, okay? And I could never figure that out because he was a guy that hit like 360, was the home run king, and, made them win the World Series, okay? I'm very surprised because he had Elston Howard, who was his teammate. So how could you be like that? And here you had Elston Howard as your teammate. He used to come up right after him. Yeah. So that part I could never understand.
Yeah, that was a big deal back at the time, and they tried to brush it under the rug, but it still leaked out.
Oh no, that never went under the rug because that made that made the front page of the newspapers.
Yeah, it was like the microcosm of 1950s America because it brought like crime and sports and uh, God, it brought so many elements together, at the
Yeah.
Copa.
And I do want to say, I forgot to say this right from the beginning. Thank you for your service. I did not know you were in the Army and you were in the Coast Guard. So with Veterans Day coming up, thank you for your service.
I appreciate that, Angela. Thank you. Happy to be a civilian, but enjoyed my time in the military and enjoying my time more now.
My husband says the same thing, but he gets mad at himself because he says, I don't know why I didn't make a career out of the Air Force. And I said, that you had control over. I said, He said, oh, I should have stayed in. He said, I would have been retired by now. But, he was young when he got out.
Well, the Air Force is a top outfit, so I can understand that completely.
Yeah, and he said that, he said, I don't know where they were going to send me. Although he had it made. He was in SHAPE headquarters in Belgium. Well, and to this day, we don't know how he got there because that was the officers' club. And when he went there, he even said, when he gave his papers, he said, somebody made a mistake. He said, I don't think I belong here. They said, no, you're in the right spot. So he had it good because he was in the officers' club. Here he was. Here I am going in as an airman and I'm in the officers' club. But I think it's because he took up the telecommunications industry, okay? And he had a top secret clearance. And that's how he got into the telecoms industry when he left the service. So I think that's why they put him there. But he had a ball because that's where he learned how to speak French. When he had time off, he went over to Paris, France. He was always in love with Paris. So I said to him, I said, well, they probably would have kept you there. He said, yeah. He said, I know. He said, I made a mistake. So he said, but you know what? He said, I did my time. He said, I was glad to be out. He said, he said, but at least, he said, I didn't run away from anything. I went in. He said, I enlisted, and I did what I had to do. But he got a career out of it. And then when he wanted to further his career, they paid for his college. So, so he says, well, I did something right. I said, yeah. I said, I guess you did.
Yeah, that's an incentive, the educational assistance they give to recruits, for sure.
The only thing he didn't want to do was fly. Well, he didn't have 20/20 vision because you got to have 20/20 vision to fly. He said, thank God, he said, I had 20/40 because I didn't want to parachute out of a plane.
Yeah, so anyone in the aviation field, as you stated, has to have 20/20 or better. Any of the jobs under aviation are like that in all the branches. Yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, I hear we got about 5 minutes left, and I'm sorry that we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. But Frank, I know you're going to be here sometime in November, correct?
Yes, we have some people we want to get in contact with. We think they're going to bring a lot of value to our Copacabana documentary. So we've got a bartender, used to be a resident, the top bartender during his time at the Copa. We've got De Niro's used to have a taxi driver. I understand this. He used to drive for De Niro and a lot of other celebrities. He trafficked the celebrities back and forth from the Copa. We're going to interview him. And then, of course, we can't wait to get with you and hear all we can hear about the...
We got Mark. And also, I told you about Danielle Pena. And I'm trying to line up a few other people. Danielle was also with Tito. He was he played with all the biggies. And I'll tell you who's very impressed with us. And he wants us to do, if we can... Part of the documentary there is Guy from the Tower Club. He bragged about you the other night with this event we were at, and I was so happy to hear that. Okay? And I said to him, I said, no, he'll be here. I said, sometime in mid-November. He said, oh, please. He says, come to the Tower Club. He says, we'd love to, he says, have the, he says, part of the documentary there. He said, I'd like to do an introduction. So I was very happy to hear that. So he's very pleased with the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a fascinating place. I was thanks to you lucky enough to get to see it and speak with them, and we're very excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, no, we're very excited to have you come back. And Mark keeps bugging me on a daily basis. When was this going to happen? So I said, Mark, hold on. I said, Frank will be here. I said, sometime in mid-November. I said, we're just working out the date.
So
Yeah, so we're in the middle of this documentary. I mean, we still have some work to do, but we're going to take our time with it, and we're going to bring the best product that we can in the end of the day,
Yeah, and what we're doing today, we're filming today. You're going to get a background behind you. I get a background behind me. And this will go live this Thursday night. It'll go on Global Trade Chamber YouTube channel, Roku TV, Spotify, and it'll be on LinkedIn, so I'll make sure I tag you on that.
Yeah, and just one last thing I'd like to say about our film. So the Copacabana reminds us, I think most often, that even glamorous institutions can come from the most complex and darkest foundations. So it was a beautiful lie, and it was a magnificent reality. That was the juxtaposition of the mob running the place while everyone thought it was on the up and up. But that's the story we want to tell. We are very excited to bring it to the audience and hopefully all around the world, you know?
Exactly. And I got a big story to tell, so I can't wait. But anyway, my dear, thank you for being part of Make Our World Your Runway. And when you're here, maybe we can physically get you in the studio and do another show.
I appreciate it, Angela. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you so much. And give John my best.
Absolutely. Will do. Take care.
All
All right. Have a great week. Take care.
You too. Take care.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another great show on Make Our World Your Runway. Frank Stitt, who is producing a documentary about the Copacabana. We can't wait for that show to come out on Thursday. And, of course, the documentary. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. And, of course, we will see you next week with another fabulous show. Have a great week.